for the introduction, and sure, I'd be happy to come and be a guest lecturer sometime on Constitution, political science, political theory, anything that you like. And when Dr. Gallen came up and visited us in our office in Washington, D.C., I told him that anytime that I could, I would possibly come on the campuses that he has here for Palm Beach State College and share and give an opportunity to be with the students and, of course, be with the public. I want to thank you all for coming out. I want to thank all the folks here from the media, whatever, and certain people here tracking me. That's pretty nice. But that's all right. We have fun with them too, and they follow us around. So I'm sure they're part of the Democrat Party budget. So make sure you guys don't get your line item veto in there. But we're here to tell you about what's going on. We're here to tell you about the facts. And as I said back when I was campaigning as a candidate, every month we come back for the constituent work period that we would have town hall meetings down in Broward County and also up here in Palm Beach County to give you an opportunity to ask questions of me, but also keep you updated on what's going on in Washington, D.C. It's so important I hear your insights, perspectives, and also we share the insights, perspectives that we see. So with that being said, we'll get started. Next slide. Can everybody see okay? What was interesting, I was sitting back there in the back, and this is a pretty famous theater. Some of the folks that have been here, I think I'm kind of bringing the real estate down, by being here myself. But, hey, first thing, right up there. 1,071 days without a budget. We passed the budget in the House last week, and it has bipartisan support. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but Senator Harry Reid's already said he's not going to take it up. There's only one thing constitutionally mandated for us in the House and the Senate. It's to pass the budget. Second straight year we've done it in the House. We're still waiting for our friends over in the Senate to do that. Now, it's an election year. And certain things happen in an election year. We're going to try to get through the appropriations process. We have the authorizations process, of course. I sit on the Armed Services Committee. We got 12 appropriations bills that we have to get done to make sure that we fund the government for fiscal year 2013. So if that does not happen, then don't be surprised if you hear the term short-term CR, continuing resolution, to get us into fiscal year 2013. And there's going to be a lot of other things we have to do. Just recently, last week, we voted to have a 90-day extension on the transportation bill, highway bill. We need to have a 5-year full extension. The Senate passed an 18-month or 2-year extension. You talk to the folks in the construction industry, that's just not going to give them enough predictability and also the opportunity to go out and invest in the right type of capital and labor and also in equipment. So we want to do this thing right and get it done by 5 years. Also, something else coming up this year that has to be up for reauthorization is the farm bill. And if you go west of here or north of here, you will see that there's a lot of citrus, a lot of produce that is done down here. So we got to get the farm bill done. That's a 5-year extension as well. Next slide. Okay, these are the facts. Every month, what I do is I pull this down, and you can see this came out on the 27th of March. I go from inauguration today to where we are today. And then I ask one simple question, of course. And I think that's the question that all people need to ask themselves. There are a lot of things that we could be doing a whole lot better. When you talk about gas prices, we got to get away from devaluing our currency, especially against the rising cost of oil per barrel. We've got to look at all the resources that we have here. You go up to North Dakota. North Dakota has about a 3 to 3.5% unemployment rate. Why? Look up the Bakken oil field. They're doing very good. We need to look at the resources we have here, the oil, the natural gas, the coal, the nuclear, the biofuels, down to the renewables, but we cannot continue to deny a full spectrum development of our energy resources just for a certain ideological agenda. Our debt is getting out of control. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. $5 trillion more debt. The debt per person you see, that's damaging for the future of this country. Every single man, woman, and child in the United States of America, that's what you owe on your head. 49,000. The misery index, well, this is something that was created during the Johnson administration. And the misery index looks at unemployment and inflation data, and that's how you come up with that number there. The high point last year was about 12.23. And right now we're sitting at 11.17. But look at it, home values, and we still have a problem down here with foreclosures in Florida. Still, here in Palm Beach and Broward County, We still have an unemployment that is pretty high when you compare that to the rest of the state, as well as when you compare that to the overall national average. So this is where we are today. Next slide. Is the country better off? When you start thinking about these numbers up here. We went back a few years to look at deficits. Now this is what happens when, yes, Republicans and Democrats work together. You can reduce the size and scope of the federal government. That happened under the Clinton administration with Republicans in the House and Senate. You can have welfare reform. That happened under the Clinton administration with Republicans in the House and Senate. This is what happens when Republicans don't adhere to fiscal conservative principles. But this year, from 2008 on, Democrat-controlled Congress, Republican presidents last year, now to this. That's 4 years of $1 trillion plus deficits. It is not about revenues coming into the United States of America, it's about the outlays and spending that goes out. If we don't get that under control, then the greatest days of the United States of America may not be ahead, may be behind. So we have to start looking at the exorbitant growth of the federal government. If you have had an opportunity to go up and visit Washington, D.C. Pretty recently, what you'll find is a lot of construction cranes in Washington, D.C. The business is good up there. Not a problem with foreclosures up there, not a problem with unemployment. If we don't turn that around and get moving back in that direction, you know, I hate to tell you, a $500 billion deficit right now, that wouldn't be too bad. It's a shame that we would think that. Next slide. I always want to show this slide because I really think that the American people need to understand what is the budget of the United States of America. It's broken down into two parts: mandatory spending and discretionary spending. And discretionary spending is broken down into two additional parts: non-defense discretionary and defense discretionary. But when you look at this slide, one thing it shows you very clearly is that the mandatory spending is 62% of the budget of the United States of America. And the mandatory spending is almost to the point where it overtakes the amount of revenues that we have coming into the federal government. You cannot do anything with this budget. You cannot do anything with the fiscal situation in the United States of America unless you have the physical and political will and courage to say that we have to reform, to protect and preserve these programs for future generations. Net interest on the debt, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now we can sit around here, we can continue to cut back on the United States defense. Now this number here in fiscal year 2011 is the base budget, but it also includes what is called OCO, Overseas Contingency Operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now of course going into fiscal year 12, because we're not in Iraq, that number has dropped down. But think about the fact that we cut $487 billion over the next 10 years out of defense. And if the sequestration hits, you're talking about another $500 to $600 billion over the next 10 years on defense. The military cannot continue to be the bill payer for the fiscal irresponsibility of the United States of America. One of the preeminent responsibilities of the federal government is to provide for the common defense, to protect the American people. We're starting to take the defense budget of the United States of America down to levels that are very dangerous. Personnel levels for the United States Marine Corps, for example, is getting down to almost World War I type levels. Naval ships, which were once about 570 in the 1990s, down to 285. We're starting to get very close down to World War I levels. 70% of the mass of the Earth is ocean. That can't do it all for us. And even here, the non-defense discretionary can't do it all for us. We're trying to cap federal government spending at 20% of our GDP. Right now, federal government spending in relation to our GDP is closer to 25%, and it's looking that it could go up to 32% of our GDP if you look at the out years to the next 10 years. 1/3 of our GDP can't be federal government spending. It's just a matter of time before you break the bank. A lot of our numbers are really starting to look like Greece. That's how dangerous this is. With that being said, next slide. We passed the budget last week. Now people can sit up here